funds coming in to do that for everybody that needs it. We can't always offer ramen, right? Quite often we dip into our own pockets to provide coffee or ramen or, whatever, for people coming in. It's just a kindness. Yeah, so we just don't have enough money. And I think every exchange in the state would tell you that. This is such a new service that there's not this infrastructure built in yet to make our programs 100% sustainable. Our executive director is currently unpaid, right? She does a lot of consulting work and so on to pay her bills. It's just not something that you're gonna make money off of.
But it's a passion.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in the field because you're passionate about it.
Absolutely. And we don't want people in here who aren't passionate, because they are the people that are going to continue to stigmatize their participants, and do things like limit syringes to an actual one-for-one exchange instead of needs-based. They're going to call them addicts instead of people who use drugs,
Right.
right? They're not going to come in with a true harm reduction mentality.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be difficult in any aspect. I don't even see how anybody would want to be in that field if they were not passionate about it, and that they're just going to judge or stigmatize that.
Right.
Any challenges that we haven't talked about?
Oh gosh, again, funding, stigma is an ever-present problem. Not just stigma around drug use, but stigma around syringe exchange, the whole concept that it is enabling someone, right? And the only thing that we're enabling with naloxone is breathing.
Right.
The only thing that we're enabling with syringe exchange is enabling people to be healthy and not contract HIV or Hep C or get a nasty staph infection from reusing a syringe. So that's an ever-present question that we have to contend with.
I think those are all the questions that I had. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to express or
Sure.
make concern?
Do you feel like you have a pretty good understanding of harm reduction philosophy? Is there anything about harm reduction you'd like to ask?
Not that I can think of. I mean, I totally grasp the concept of it is what it is. Let's do what we can to reduce it. I'm all for that. And I'm all for representing this population and eliminating this whole labeling and stigma thing, because realistically we have all been touched by it in some way, and if we keep putting that out there, we're doing more harm than good, with that.
Definitely. And so I'd like to add too that harm reduction is not just a philosophy about reducing harm, but encouraging people to make what we say is any positive change, right? So we recognize that chaotic drug use is not a place you want to be, right? You can't be your best self. You can't take care of yourself or your family if you are in chaotic addiction, if you're breaking into people's houses, right? Going to jail, doing this, that, and the other, or putting your health at risk, or you're overdosing every day. That's not a goal. That's not a place to be. And so we very much encourage people to make any positive change. And by that, I mean, if you come into the office saying, I'm smoking crack 7 days a week and I want to smoke crack 6 days a week, we say, great. How can we help you get there? We recognize that people who use drugs are the experts in their own lives and what they need. Think about someone who comes in for housing assistance. They're going to be late on their rent, or they're already behind. They say, I need my rent paid. The housing provider or the helping person says, well, I think what we need to do is do intense budget analysis, and maybe we need to refer you to career services, and then on top of that, we're going to need receipts proving what you did with your money for the last 3 months, and
the typical social services,
right? And then maybe we can pay you $100 of your rent. That's not what that person needs. They need the rent paid, right?
Right.
They came in and told you what they needed. If they need help finding a job, they're going to say that. I'm unemployed, that's why I'm behind on my rent. Okay, great. Refer them to career services and pay their rent. Pay whatever is due. Don't pay $100 and ask them to prove what they did with their disability check for 3 months. Nobody can live off of $600 or $700 a month. This is a no-brainer, right?
Right.
So, and then go advocate for SSI rates to be raised. Don't waste your time if somebody's disabled, sending them to career services is insulting unless they truly are to the point where they're maybe stable enough or healthy enough that they could work a little bit and earn some extra money. That's just insulting to make people do that. So we recognize that people who use drugs every bit as much. They know. They're gonna say, I need to stop breaking into people's houses and getting abscesses by reusing syringes. Okay, we're gonna try to help you dial back that use to a manageable level. We're gonna give you clean syringes so you don't keep getting abscesses that get infected and you end up in the hospital and can't work,
Right,
right? People know what they need, they're not stupid.
right. So the part of that treatment planning, have you had any success stories of
Sure.
people coming,
Sure.
getting completely clean and coming back and saying, thank you?
So I would encourage you to look at person first language. We wanna drop the label clean and use either abstinent or not using drugs, right?
Okay,
Because clean implies a certain level of stigma, doesn't it? You had to be dirty to get clean,
true.
right? So that's again why I was saying we really prefer to say sterile syringes or unused syringes instead of clean syringes, because it puts this moral framework around something that's a public health problem, not a moral problem. So we have had people absolutely who have gotten into methadone or buprenorphine treatment who have gotten stabilized and come back and said, you know, thank you so much for being the point of entry for me to, you know, get my kids back, get my job back, get housed again, or even just get my drug use manageable. I still want to live in a tent, but I'm to the point where at least I can keep my tent clean and,
Yeah.
you know, stay with it enough to move my tent when I know the police are coming to destroy my encampment. So, you know, our goal, our definition of success needs to be tailored to what that person's definition of success is. And there are honestly people who want to sleep in a tent and not
Right.
have the responsibility of bills and, you know, mowing the lawn and, you know, that's got to be respected as a choice.
Right. Is there any group therapy or individual therapy that is
So
housed with you? Or?
we offered individual therapy for a while, with a psychologist who, I don't know if he's based out of I think he's one of the local universities, and he would come over for a while and offer some individual therapy. And then we do have Sunday trainings, which sometimes are like an any positive change type of support group, for lack of a better word. Or sometimes they're just trainings on harm reduction and overdose reversal.
Okay.
And then we're going to get our regular group back up and running, which is an any positive change group. And I only call it support in as much as the people within the group cheer each other on, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no defined steps, there's no prescribed way to do it. As I said, we respect people as the experts in their own lives. So if they come in and say, my goal is to stop reusing syringes, great, we're going to support you in that. How do we encourage you to come to the exchange often enough to get the supplies you need so that you're not reusing syringes, right?
Yeah.
And you quite often will see that someone who comes in and is engaged on that level and respected as an expert where they're at will eventually want to start making other positive changes. Maybe they want to consider methadone or buprenorphine, and we absolutely encourage that. We often say to folks who are really in chaos, give it 2 weeks. Go try methadone for 2 weeks. And if your life is not better, you've always got the option to go back and continue to be in chaotic use, right?
Right.
Just give it 2 weeks, see what happens. And people often find that all of a sudden their lives are so much more manageable when they have medication available to control the cravings and control the desire to use drugs.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I like how you say them being experts of themselves, you know, and meeting them where they're at in that aspect. I think that's really important. Instead of putting, you know, our own level of, well, this is what I would expect from you. You're really putting the ball in their court.
Right, absolutely. Abstinence is not always an appropriate or achievable goal. And when that's the only accepted standard of success, you're automatically setting people up to fail.
Yeah. Yeah. So even in respects to when you talked about like group therapy with steps and stuff like that, do you feel like that's a hindrance to?
I'm reluctant to say that because I want anything that works to be available to anyone who needs it. So if there's something about the structure or the faith-based or whatever it is of a 12-step group, by all means go do that, right? If that's what is going to help you make your life the best that it can be, we would never tell people not to engage in those 12-step groups. but we have seen that a lot of 12-step groups are reluctant to take people who are on medication assisted treatment. So people either hide it or just don't go. So there are some tenets of certain 12-step communities that can be a hindrance to a harm reduction based recovery.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's all I got, unless you got something else that
No, I don't think
would be,
so.
I mean, there's so much to learn
Absolutely.
about this, and to put the word out there, I think is really, really important. How many counties across the state do you think we have exchange programs in?
I think almost a good share of the state is covered. We have, as far as which counties, I think there are 9 syringe exchange programs in North Carolina. I think that's the right number. And that doesn't count any secondary exchanges. You know, people who are getting syringes from like us and then going out to High Point and distributing them, or people up in the mountains that are getting them and going to rural areas and distributing them. But I think 9 is close to the right number. And so, are there enough? No, of course not. But I think we have good coverage at this point. There are still gaps in the rural areas and the coastal areas that are also kind of rural. But I think the cities are fairly well covered.
Okay. How can an individual or community help you in your mission?
So, education is the first and foremost component, right? You've got to come learn what harm reduction is and isn't. It's not enabling, right? It's not telling people that it's really awesome to use drugs. In fact, we see that there's no change in drug use when you have a syringe exchange in town. If anything, there may be some reduction. There's absolutely a reduction in infectious diseases that are spread through syringe sharing, and there's also a reduction in syringe litter, right? So we're not finding a whole bunch of used syringes out in the park because people are bringing them to be properly disposed of, or are taking home a container, disposing of them at home, and then bringing them to the exchange to be disposed of later. So they're being handled in an appropriate fashion. Secondly, don't say not in my backyard, right? If somebody wants to set up a syringe exchange in your neighborhood, find out what that means. Find out what kind of people do and don't come to syringe exchanges. Find out who's working at the syringe exchange. Be educated and be supportive if you can be. I understand there are some people that are just never going to accept the idea of harm reduction. But at the very least, if you don't want somebody setting up in your neighborhood, find an alternative that's realistic. No, they can't set up 30 miles outside of town, right? They need to be on the bus route. They need to be, or if you don't have, town doesn't have a bus, they need to be accessible, you know, on the main road in a realistic location. I mean, of course, people's financial support is always welcome. Support legislation that supports syringe exchange if you can't make a private donation. But I think the key is just really being educated and not opposing our work and seeing that, like I said, we're not encouraging people to use drugs and we are making real change in communities.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do appreciate you coming and talking with me. I've learned a lot, and I can't wait to go back and talk about it, of course, with the my professor and spread the word.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your project.
So right now I'm in 2 criminal justice classes. One is on theory and one is just the intro to different theories on labeling, social learning theories. It's all very new to me. I do work in the field somewhat. I actually work with offenders who come home from prison in efforts to reduce recidivism. And so I've got a little bit of like learning a lot from my groups and stuff like that, but there's so much more that I don't know, especially with harm reduction and a lot of other stuff that I'm just so greedy, really. I just want to learn. I just want to know what's out there, how can I help, and how can I contribute to it, and be a part of that change. And of course, the needle exchange was a big part of that I wanted to know about, and how, you know, the more I know, then the more resources I can offer the people I work with.
Definitely. And I would say, because you are working in reentry, people who are just coming out of jail or prison are at very high risk for overdose because they have no tolerance, because we don't offer medication assisted treatment in jails. or prisons.
I didn't know
So,
that.
Yeah, so people coming out have been off of drugs for a great deal of time, but that doesn't mean that their cravings have gone away, right? So their tolerance is way down. So when they come out and they use the amount that they used to use before they went to
Right.
jail, they may die right there.
Right.
And so I would very much recommend that if your people are coming out and appear to have a history of opioid use, suggesting, do you need to be evaluated for methadone or buprenorphine? Do you need to engage in the services of a syringe exchange, right?
Right.
Putting those options out there.
I had no idea that they didn't have medication assisted treatment. I know we had touched, I was speaking with another colleague and we had touched a little bit about, well, what if they come in high? Are they doing a medical detox or are they just leaving them? And how much of it is so swept under the rug and how many deaths have occurred because they refuse to help?
Right, and that death is a very real risk. It's not from the detox itself, but the side effects of it. So if you're profusely vomiting and have profuse diarrhea, you're going to become dehydrated.
Mhm.
And if you're just ignored and not provided with IV fluids, you die right there.
Yeah, that's scary. I had read an article that back in the beginning of jails and prisons that they would keep alcohol on hand for those coming in, and it was like, well, that's smart if you can't offer a medical detox to at least maintain that. But why are we failing now? Why are we doing that?
Absolutely. And you brought up a very good point. Alcohol is literally the most dangerous drug out there.
Right.
It's legal. We don't want illegal. That's just going to bring up all the problems we have now with the drug war, right?
Right.
And have all that and alcohol. But alcohol is on a scale of harm that was scientifically evaluated is like way up there, higher than heroin, quite a bit higher than heroin. So detox is also very dangerous. You're exactly right. You could have a seizure and die when you're coming off of alcohol, dependence. So that's a good point.
Yeah, that really is. I've always said we focus mostly on just changing the faulty belief systems and working on those behaviors. But of course, there's a lot of people that come through that have substance use issues, and that's a big concern. It really bothers me that they do not do anything in the prisons to help them. I mean, if you can't be a part of the solution, then you're just a part of the problem.
Absolutely.
In my mind.
Yeah.
And I always tell my folks that you have to advocate for yourself. If you see something that is wrong, you have to educate and advocate for yourself. Otherwise, change will never happen.
And for the most part, it's going to have to come from without, because prisoners, inmates are not listened to, right? They're not considered experts. They are considered a burden and a problem and very much idiots.
Right.
And so you're not going to take people saying, hey, I need help with my alcohol use disorder detox seriously. You say, well, you know what? You're in jail, so suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah, part of that labeling and shaming and all of that is not helpful.
No,
It's
absolutely not.
adding to the problem.
Yeah.
Those labels are a huge deal, and coming out, not being able to get the resources that you need to be successful because you have that check the box kind of thing going on is a big issue.
Right.
So I think between the medication assisted treatments, the syringe programs, harm reduction programs, all of that wraparound service, I feel like is kind of
Compartmentalized.
that needs to somehow come together a little bit closer to be more effective. There's got to be change because I think what we've been doing for so long, we've evolved from that. It's no longer working, so we have to adapt to the way things are now.
Yeah.
So what does that look like?
Well, that's where you come in.
Well, I hope so. So there's just so much I just want to wrap my head around and talk to everybody to see where can I be a part of that? Where can I be a part of that change?
Good.
So,
We're relying on people like you who are still in school, coming up with new ideas, ways to make the broken system better.
yeah, it's got to change.
Yeah.
But I thank you so much for taking the
Absolutely.
time with me, and I'll definitely be in touch moving forward if I have any questions, if that's okay. And
Yeah, if you have any follow-up, just email me.
thank you for sharing.
Sure, you're
I
welcome.
appreciate it.
Yep, no problem.